Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Jiu Jitsu concept, specifically passing the guard and playing guard. There's a couple things that are really important to keep in mind when you're passing the guard and when you're playing the guard. And there's some similarities, the main thing being that you need to control your own hips. You can't let the other person control your hips. If you let somebody else control your hips, then your movement's very limited. So that's both offense from the guard and offense on top, trying to pass. So that's one thing that you always have to maintain control of. Something else, so let's take a look at the guard. For the guard player, you have to have two things. You have to know where you want to have your grips. So where are you going to be gripping? Are you gripping the sleeve? Is it the collar? Is it the same side, collar and sleeve, cross side? Are you gripping the pant leg? If it's no-gi, where are your hands going? How are you using your hooks and overhooks? And the other thing that's important is using your feet. You have to keep your feet engaged, whether you're pushing with the soles of your feet or you're hooking the back of their legs with the tops of your feet. Maybe you're locking your legs. But for the most part, to have a good open guard, I think that's an area where most people struggle with. Closed guard, half guard, that's pretty basic. We just lock our legs and there's some fine tuning with how we move our legs, but that really has more to do with your hips than actually your legs. So again, two things. Your feet and using your feet to push, pushing on their hips, pushing on their biceps. Those are probably two main positions. Sometimes we use our hooks to push as well, or we call it kicking, right? So you might be kicking with your De La Riva hook, reverse De La Riva hook. Sometimes you're kicking with that to create space and in essence push off of that. That with your feet, so keeping your feet alive so that you can push, so that you can kick, and also keeping your grips in the correct place and making sure that they're working together. That's a concept that you always want to be thinking about as you're studying the guard. And it goes without saying, you have to have movement of your hips. But in order to make best use of your hips, if you have your feet and your grips in the right place, most of the times your hips will kind of take care of themselves. So you don't really have to think too much about your hips if your feet and your hands are in the right place. Sometimes there's some tricky hip movement that you need to be mindful of, and it takes some training. But for the most part, just making sure that you have the right grips, making sure your feet are in the right place is going to give you a pretty solid guard for starters. And then let's take a look at passing. Passing is a little bit different. Passing, rather than your feet, now we're going to think about where we're putting our knees. It's really important to understand where your knees are going, right? Are they, and you'll find that if your knees are in the right place, you've probably put the guard player's feet behind you. So their feet are no longer hooking, their feet are no longer kicking and and pushing on your body. You'll find that their feet are behind you where you can't see, as opposed to looking down and seeing their feet in front of you, in between your bodies. So thinking about your knees and then thinking about your hands. It goes without saying, your hands, your grips. Where are you grabbing the sleeve? Are you grabbing the collar? Are you grabbing the pant leg? Some people don't really grab anything and they're posting. That's how some guard players play. It's important to understand or think about, maybe if you're studying guard passing, you can think about where two things to look at. Where are the grips going, and how are they using their knees? Sometimes people don't use their knees when it comes to pressure passing. You'll find that instead of their knees, people aren't using their knees and they're using their shoulders instead. So maybe you'll find some players that are adamant about playing a heavy pressure passing type of game, and rather than their knees, might be good to take a look at how they're using their shoulders in place of their knees. But for most guard most guard passers, I think you'll find it's going to be where their grips are going and where they're putting their knees. So pay close attention to those two things for the guard passer and those two things for the guard player. It's really, again, it goes without saying, the guard passer is going to have, they're going to have a better time, or they're going to have control of their own hips if their hands and their grips and their knees are in the right place. Just like the guard player, right? If their hands and feet are in the right place, most of the time their hips are going to be moving freely. And so it goes for the guard passer as well. So keep that in mind as you're passing the guard or playing a guard. One more thing, let's see. In studying a concept, it can be kind of really vague, but what I would recommend is to take a look at a specific move and to see how that concept applies to that specific move. Sometimes it won't apply and you'll find a different rule. I think for the most part, you could make a generalization and say this applies in most situations. I wouldn't go as far as saying that this is a universal rule, right? But you know, it would. I'm pretty confident saying if the guard player has his feet, I mean, yeah, this is true. If the guard player has his feet between you and them, then you haven't passed the guard. So you have to get the feet out of the way. But more than thinking about passing the guard and the actual act of passing the guard, I'm talking about just having control playing guard, having control passing somebody's guard. And be mindful of where your knees are going, where they are, and where they're going. Be mindful of where your grips are and where they're going, and making necessary adjustments with your grips, with your knees, with your feet, and with your grips from the guard, so that you can have a stronger guard and you can have a stronger pass. If you guys have any questions, comment below. More than happy to help your game. I'll see you guys on the mat.